Good morning. It's the 24th of April, 2025. We are just days away from the Canadian federal election, and we are joined once again by our political correspondent, Chantal Desloge, who is going to join us to go through the various platforms that have been presented by the key parties. We're going to focus, of course, on the Liberal and the Conservative Party platforms, but none of us could find an NDP actual platform, like a statement, so we think that there wasn't one available. We'll touch on the statements that were provided also by the Green and the PPC and the Bloc, but we're going to focus on the two main parties. But I don't know, where do you guys want to start?
What's your overall sense been of the campaign with 3 or 4 days left?
Yeah, it's just been such a shock. I mean, to see the Conservatives blow that big of a lead, it's such a dramatic turnaround. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. It's pretty incredible. And I mean, there's still, there's still a little bit of uncertainty as to how exactly things are going to shake down. But I don't know. I think the writing's on the wall here. Just, based on the response in the advanced polls.
If you had asked us like 6 weeks ago if such a thing was possible, I don't think any of us would. It felt like the writing was absolutely on the wall that that this was going to go Conservative.
And
6 weeks ago, I can't remember. Like, as soon as Carney announced that he was running, it just seemed like there was a huge segment of the population that just
that's our guy,
adored him. Like, it's really, including a lot of immigration lawyers who, like, one was messaging me just saying, like, they really want and are excited for a strong technocrat. And, we'll get to, like, what it means about his mandate. Like, there's the platforms that have been released, but I feel like there's almost just Mark Carney, if they win, has a mandate. Basically, do what he wants, because people seem to have just thrown their trust to him.
There was just such a sense of the incredible floundering that had happened, and the kind of clear, no nonsense, this is what's going to happen, I'm a bank guy. I think that instilled a lot of confidence, and I think he just got a ton of support, much beyond what I expected in the space of time that he was able to mobilize.
I'm just puzzled by the logic by which people would say, however many weeks ago, like, the Liberals are the worst thing that ever happened. And then all of a sudden they change one guy and now everybody changes their mind. Like, I just find that really puzzling. Like, what,
and the other thing, if you had told me that the Liberals going to the right and basically taking Poilievre's positions on a lot of things would lead to the NDP support collapsing and going to the Liberals over a central banker who's going to lead the party, I wouldn't have believed it.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing too, like, exactly what you said, Chantal, that it's like the stance on so many issues, it's not that these are like going to true kind of liberal values or anything like that. It's more just this sense of like, somebody's got the house, like somebody's going to manage this situation, get us feeling more secure. Like, I feel like this really was about the sense of like the fear of the tariffs, somebody's being a bully, we need somebody to stand up to the bully. It was more about that than anything about, what the policies were. It was just like, who's going to stand up?
I went to a really interesting seminar earlier this week where they were really unpacking the polling since January in a great degree of granular detail. And what they were finding is that, right from the beginning, anytime Trump would rear his ugly head, the fear in the Canadian public would spike, and the support for the Liberals would also spike. And there was a clear correlation between those two things. Like, the more afraid they were of Trump, the more they would be likely to stick with the Liberals. And it's particularly once Carney was on the scene.
I think that this is really, like, we need to linger here for a minute or two. Like, this is an election that has been so incredibly driven by what's happening outside of Canada, and just a response to like this threat from the outside, this idea that like who's going to protect Canada. That we're going to talk about immigration and what those platforms are and all of that sort of thing, but just this idea that things have gone off the rails, that we have all of these potential aggressors, that the world is like, we need to recover, we need to go into this period of recovery, and who's going to be that person who's going to do that for us? That is just such a key driver.
Mm-hmm. And it's not just in Canada, the UK and Australia, the center-right parties there are seeing big declines. I saw that Australia, I think, is going through a similar election where the Liberal Party there, which are the Conservatives, it's like the opposite of here, were projected to win. Now the other party is going to get a majority. In the UK, a deeply unpopular Labour government is, sprung back. Trump,
it feels like a
ironically,
wartime election in a way. It feels like we're deep into like a world war. It sort of has. I don't know. I've never lived through that, but it does feel like it's got I imagine what it would feel like if we were into like a complex global conflict. I mean, we are, but not in the same kind of overt way that you would have seen during the First or Second World War, I guess. But it seems to be it's more those same types of drivers that are formulating what's happening as opposed to the same domestic things that we would normally look at. So,
and we've got Noah Churchill.
yeah, exactly. It's a kind of Thatcher Churchill. It's that sort of a situation where it's more about emotions, I think. Who's going to protect the house as opposed to like, these are my ideals. This is my view about liberalism, my view about politics. It's just like, who's going to make me feel safer?
Yep. Any other thoughts in general before we dive into these platforms? I will say that, what's the name of that logical fallacy? The gel amnesia fallacy, where if you know a lot about one area, then whenever you read news stories about it, you think, oh, this is all wrong, but then as soon as you go to a topic that you don't know much about, you completely trust what's being said. And that's sort of how I thought when I was reading some of these platforms. As someone who knows immigration law in and out, you could see through the bullshit. Whereas, but then and it was actually almost insulting, some of what was being written, because I could see how it would, placate or impress other people. But then when I'd go and read other sections, I'd have to remind myself of that to be like, well, if the immigration stuff was this off, like net zero and all these other issues, like I don't know anything. But it has been like, it's made me just a lot more cynical about the platforms overall to read some of the immigration pieces.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. It feels like a very populist kind of platforms. There's a lot of flag waving.
Yeah, and a lot of very fuzzy language. A lot of the the descriptors that are there, like when you start really looking at them, it's like, what are they even saying? I mean, that doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's currying to those kind of like those fears and all of that sort of thing, as opposed to like trying to kind of curry up sort of favor and comfort and all of that sort of thing.
So let's start with the PPC, a party that is unlikely to win any seats, but there's something to be said that the Conservatives, if they want to watch their right flank, have to at least be aware of what this party is doing. And just super quick again, because I think they're at 1 to 3% in the polls. The PPC is pledging to impose a moratorium on new permanent residents for as many years as necessary until the housing crisis has cooled down, although they later in that same paragraph say that the number will be between 100 to 150,000. For comparison, I think this year Canada's target is about 385. They will reformulate the point system to focus on high value added sectors and reduce family reunification, abolish the parent and grandparent program, face-to-face interviews for all applicants, deport anyone who is here illegally, deport people who obtain their status through misrepresentation, which is already a thing, fewer workers, fewer students, fewer refugees, birth tourism illegal, and withdraw from the Global Compact for Migration, which we did a whole podcast episode on, and I would be lying if I said that I remembered really a lot of what that was. Any comments on the PPC?
I mean, it's not surprising that they take that position. I mean, that this is a dog whistle to their base for sure. It's completely unrealistic. I mean, how are you ever going to attract people to Canada who have high level of skills if you tell them that they're never going to be able to bring the rest of their family? That's silly and ridiculous.
Yeah.
And how do you put a moratorium on new permanent residents? Like, the demographics don't lie, right? Like, we need people. The question is just like where to hit the target. You can't just turn off the pipe and then turn it on a few years later and expect a bunch of qualified people to apply again.
You know how you impose a moratorium? You invite a ton of workers and then say only those who speak French can stay.
Oh God.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is an obvious place to start with the thing about limiting the number of refugees. It's a question of what does that mean? Does that mean just backing out of Canada's international commitments? Like, how does that work in real time?
Well, so they say priority to those who are persecuted minority groups. They'll reject fake claims. And that's actually
easier said than done. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that there's never been a mandate to accept fake claims.
Right. You have to be a persecuted minority group already.
Already the rule. And so it's a demand-driven thing. You have to prove the genuineness of your claim, and that you would face persecution. So that's actually nothing new. It's just a matter of it's not that easy to do that adjudication in a way that actually meets international law standards. So it's it's nice theory.
Or even our own charter standards.
Yeah,
100%. International law. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go to the Greens, who wrote a book. Who wrote a book and then didn't get invited to the debates because they didn't run candidates. The Greens are interesting. I was chatting before we started because they talk about how immigration is one of Canada's greatest strengths. The Liberal government, trusted McKinsey and Company too much, set an annual immigration target of 500,000 with no plan on where they would live, that there was too much immigration. But then all of their plans involve facilitating more immigration, which is an interesting, they don't really reconcile why they're saying it was too much and how they'll do more. So increase funding for skills training, for professional associations to adopt faster ways to address credential recognition, reducing processing times for permanent residents, new pathway for essential workers, an employer-driven immigration program to transition foreign workers and essential services to permanent residents, reducing application fees based on income, another new pathway, although limited to critical shortages where qualified Canadians are not available, regularizing the status of undocumented individuals in Canada on a case-by-case basis. That I guess would be different from the current H&C regime. Reducing application fees, more humanitarian streams, terminating the Safe Third Country Agreement, expanding more parent and grandparent caps, reducing processing times for family sponsorship, no visa requirement for parents visiting their children, figuring out how immigration can support climate resilience. I have no idea what that would mean. Engaging with municipalities, Indigenous governments to assess the potential for more resettlement strategies, CBSA oversight, penalties for unethical immigration consultants, lost Canadians get their citizenship, the London Statement to regulate education agents, reviewing what designated learning institutions are doing, phase out the foreign worker program in non-agricultural streams, open work permits, increase penalties for labor law violations, double the proof of funds requirement to 20,000 for student plus 8,000 per accompanying member and 6,000 per child. Require study permit visa holders to periodically report proof of sufficient financial information to IRCC. Reestablish the limit to a maximum of 20 hours. Some of this feels like it was like written a few months ago, and like because the SDS is gone, it's now 24 hours per week.
My general
Restrict
read
visa
on this,
issuance for
though,
schools where 15% or more of international students fail to enroll, withdraw, or transfer out.
yeah.
Sorry, yeah, that's the last. I only read about half of them.
Yeah, I mean, my general read though is that they want much less reliance on temporary channels and much more on permanent resettlement. Like, I don't know if you read the one about phasing out the temporary foreign worker program for non-agricultural, but like really more like permanent resettlement with capacity building that goes along with it. And so, again, they don't. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know how you reconcile that with also wanting to target like specific sectors and make sure that there, are not labor shortages. Because as we know, the minute somebody becomes a permanent resident, they can switch their career. They can go do a job that's easier. They can move to a more attractive location. It's really hard to target those shortages, I think, if you don't have a temporary foreign worker program.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Like who's going to be a caregiver? Who's going to keep doing that job after they become their PR? Like how many people do you know that actually do that? Right.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, to me, this is one of the tensions around immigration policy and charter values, because the charter does protect mobility rights. And so, it's a very, like, it's a complex question. And I think that that's one that we kind of bumped up against with the way that the caregiver programs were launched now as direct to permanent residents. They kind of, they sort of created this program without really deciding this issue. And it's like, but I think, again, there's just a lot of controversy over how much we wish to control the population, and also whether or not it makes sense to allow people to come in this temporary role when we don't wish to have them have the freedoms to be able to kind of move on and change and actually establish themselves in the way that they choose in the future.
Yeah. Anyway, we've spent more minutes discussing the Greens than likely to get the popular vote. So
yeah, for sure. But it's an interesting issue that I think comes up in all of the platforms in a way. What is the kind of theory behind immigration strategy plan?
Yeah. So I'm gonna, we blitzed through the first few, and I'm going to read the next few slower, searching by immigration.
I think you find most of it on page 42 of the...
Page 42 of their platform?
Yeah.
All right. Both of the parties released their platforms a bit late, but here we go. Immigration, which was much less discussed in this election than I thought it would be.
Yeah, Trump really sucked the oxygen out of that debate, for sure.
Right.
And every debate about every important thing to Canada except...
Well, and also it wasn't a topic in the English debate. For some reason, during the French debate, they got to discuss immigration, and the equivalent topic in the English debate was leadership, whatever that means, which I didn't watch the debates, but...
There were some sidebar questions that brought up immigration, but it wasn't like raised as a topic in and of itself. So they did end up mentioning their positions on immigration, but as you said, it wasn't actually a standalone topic. They were clearly trying to be very delicate around it.
So the Liberal platform starts with an intro paragraph of fluff. While the United States is a melting pot, Canada is a mosaic. Many families came here to build better lives and be part of Canada. Diverse communities have brought new businesses, innovations, culture, religious plurality, and a strong, well-educated workforce to Canada. There's another paragraph that essentially says the same thing. And then, since the pandemic, the previous federal government has let immigration levels grow at a rapid and unsustainable pace, with our housing and social infrastructure failing to absorb all the people arriving. We just pause and talk about, like, what are your thoughts on this, the previous federal government?
Meaning us.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know, like, I happen to really, like, I like Mark Carney. And I go back and forth between like, I like Mark Carney, but I also feel like I'm almost being treated as a huge sucker in the way a lot of this is being presented. And this sentence especially, the previous federal government let immigration levels grow too much. This places at risk the bargain Canadians accept of a sustainable intake. The government has a responsibility to those who come here to make sure there's access to jobs, social services, and housing. This isn't in there, but I'll just add rather than food banks. If we cannot meet these responsibilities, we need to adjust. So a Mark Carney-led government will, number one, return immigration to sustainable levels by capping the total number of temporary workers and international students to less than 5% of Canada's population by the end of 27, from a high of 7.3. So, in other words, a Mark Carney government will do what the previous government has already committed to. And that's part of, again, like where I just feel like I'm being taken as a bit of a sucker. If I didn't already know what the Trudeau government commitments were, I would think that the Trudeau government jacked up immigration and the Mark Carney target of 5% is a brand new thing, rather than something that has already been in place since the end of 2024.
Yeah, and I think this whole notion of capping people who are here temporarily, I mean, particularly if we look at temporary foreign workers in general, it's hard to be responsive to labor market demand if you're talking about absolute numbers, right? I mean, how can you be nimble to respond to labor market shortages if what you're dealing with is a fixed cap?
No, I agree. And they also don't seem like, they keep talking about imposing this cap. They haven't closed down like the Iran open work permit program. They extended the Canada-Ukraine authorization. Like right now, the numbers aren't going to work for their proposed caps. I've said before, I think they're just going to redefine things and achieve this through just statistical manipulation.
Yeah.
Which, I don't want to sound like too critical of the Liberals here, but that's been one of the accusations about how they're going to redefine the budget into operating and capital, which is fine, but it is a way of like tinkering with the stats to achieve desired outcomes.
Like I said, yeah, I feel like this is a populist election platform, and this is sort of what you're getting at here, in my view, Steve. Like when I kind of went in and started gushing about the Green platform, they were coming out with the like, we love immigration, newcomers are important, we think that they're a value regardless of what they go off and do in the future. Like it was a value statement, regardless of not running candidates, regardless of all of this sort of thing. It was a manifesto, so to speak. The Liberals came at this almost like they were learning from the lessons of the Kamala Harris campaign. You know, like we need to make a clear statement. What they did, they being us 6 weeks ago, is not what we want to do. We see that there are problems. We understand the public is not behind large scale immigration, and we are going to make all these statements saying we are not going to do the same thing. We understand that nobody's going to look and break down the statistics unless it's a bunch of immigration lawyers who already understand all of this stuff. But we're going to say that our stance is down on immigration, basically. That's how I read it.
Yeah, with the next one, kind of related to the first, stabilize permanent residence admissions at less than 1% of Canada's population annually beyond 2027, focusing on attracting top global talent that will drive economic growth and prosperity, and also have reunification for families and resettlement. I'm going to combine this with the one that I think shook a few immigration lawyers, or at least surprised. Establish a 12% target for Francophone immigration outside of Quebec by 2029, a 20% increase from current targets to strengthen Francophone communities throughout Canada. I don't know how you both cap immigration at 1% population growth, have the Francophone target of 12%, and try to attract the best and the brightest.
Yeah.
I think we've already seen the impact that the Francophone target is having this year, where the target is like, we're not even at 10%, let alone 20%. just
Not
down
to
here, where it's
mention that
8.5%, and the
yeah.
Francophone targets are dominating express entry
Yeah.
to the point that it's becoming very hard for people to retain skilled workers elsewhere. You take the 8.5% that we have now at an overall planned admission of about 395. You can see here actually in the In Canada focus, it's shrinking, right? 82,000 to 70,000. The Francophone number going up is going to leave very little room for other people. And I don't know how they will be able to meet this promise of both 12% Francophone targets and attracting the best and the brightest.
And not to mention this definition of Francophone, I have some trouble with.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Yeah.
that speaking a minimal level of French is not the same as a Francophone.
Well, that was when they redefined the Francophone work permit program from like you had to be Francophone to you had to have intermediate oral or speaking. Again, it's just like redefining terms. It's what I think the temporary targets are going to be.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, for anybody who's listening today who might not be, you know, so well versed on the selection system under express entry, like people have gone through and done a breakdown of points of, you know, how, you know, an Anglophone or any other language you want other than French could be like, you know, a PhD in this and that, and like the most highly qualified person. And then you got another person who really their only skill is that they happen to be fluent in French, and they're getting selected over people who arguably are much more highly qualified. And that is skewing this whole thing about the best and the brightest. I mean, you know, the best and the brightest, or if you speak French.
Yeah. Like a year of experience in a high demand occupation versus intermediate level French that you never intend to use and never intend to speak in a community that doesn't speak French.
Exactly.
It's very weird, like social engineering going on.
Super bizarre. And also like virtue signaling to the French speaking community without actually substantively changing the demographic of the French speaking capacity of Canada.
Yeah. I remember after the French debate when Mark Carney tweeted that he was increasing the 12% target, a few immigration lawyers contacted me. And again, this is just part of the weird Carney technocrat obsession that some people have where they were like, I'm surprised he's doing that. I thought he was an economist. And I just like wanted to hit my head against a wall. But I actually was also surprised because I too thought that was largely a previous government thing, but it looks like it will be stepping into overdrive. If you believe,
what do you think drives this? Like, what is the motivator behind this?
Lobbying.
Why lobbying by
Francophone communities? Back when I briefly worked in politics, the Francophone communities are pretty good lobbyists. Like they're organized, they're vocal. I think
is it because the Quebec support does decide the election outcome?
Quebec support. It could just be a genuine belief in the bilingualism of the country. But yeah, I think that's what's motivating it. Whether they stick to it, I don't know. They've stuck to it longer than I thought they would. Yeah. A lot of, I shouldn't say a lot of, a few Indian immigration consultants have told me that they think it's an indirect way of getting to country caps and reducing volume from India. I don't know if you've heard anything similar, Chantal, but that's definitely a sentiment that a few people have expressed to me, that it's a way to reduce Indian immigration.
Yeah, the whole thing seems very like suspect. I can't quite get at
it. Yeah.
I mean, I remember hearing once many, many years ago that where Quebec goes tends to have a very high impact on how the result of the election goes. I don't know if that still tracks or
I don't know.
I don't break down the politics, the popular vote in that way in my mind.
Yeah, anybody who wants to win a federal election needs their support.
Yeah.
And like you can almost see like the butt kissing, like jumping off the page, and it's this in all of the platforms. This this deference to Quebec all the time.
Yeah. Then in BC, the election's normally decided by the time we vote or finish voting.
Right.
Continuing attracting the best talent in the world to build our economy by revitalizing the global skills strategy to help businesses and entrepreneurs with new projects. This will include attracting highly skilled talent from the United States who can help grow the economy here in Canada.
This took my attention, specifically mentioning the United States. Like, okay, if that's a demographic that they're going to target, how exactly are they going to do that? That's interesting.
Well, first they got to target the French-speaking ones only, because those are the only ones who will be able to stay.
Go down to Louisiana, get the Creole.
Yeah.
Also, I don't even know, like they're, I guess, expanding LMIA exemptions for Americans is what they may be considering. I don't know. David Eby in British Columbia has also said, like, we need to attract Americans, but it's not clear what is actually going to be proposed, and then whether these Francophone targets will let them stay permanently. Because global skills strategy is a temporary.
It's a temporary form. Yeah, exactly. And so, yes, as you say, like, does that, and now they get no points for their arranged employment. So it would just be based on years of work experience. But again, they need to be either super young, super highly educated, lots of years of work experience, not even salary. Like, again, it's hard to understand how those people would qualify for permanent residency, or whether or not we're going to hurt the recruitment by having so limited pathways to permanent residency.
Mm-hmm. Work towards a faster and fairer process and enhance service delivery for applicants by leveraging digital service tools to reduce processing times and eliminate backlogs. So expanding Chinook.
Yeah.
But they're firing like half of IRCC, so they're going to have to do this.
Yeah. I think they're replacing
firing is the right
is
word,
my
laying off.
Yeah.
When I read that just made me cringe, because every digital attempt that they have made has been such a disaster. I don't know how you fix that. I don't know how you get that working the way that they want it to. Who do they hire for IT? I have no idea. It's nothing that they do.
AI superpower
ever works.
Yeah. And the other part of it is that I don't yet think the connection between the poorness of the automation and AI IT and what's happening in the courts that connection has fully been made. But the court is broken right now. No aspersions on the court. It just can't keep up with the volume. Yeah. So much of which is just about delay, and also just the quality of decision making coming out of those enhanced service delivery apparati. And I think that, we're not even at the stage of being able to do kind of the data analytics necessary to see how badly those systems are working. And there's really no initiative or impetus to do that right now, because, like, as far as they're concerned, once a decision is made, it's made. And
it's so opaque, and they've kept it so opaque that it's difficult to attack, because if you want to, you have to have the evidentiary record if you want to argue it in court, right? Like, you have to prove how they're doing it, and because they're not telling anyone, it's not leaving it vulnerable to any kind of an argument. It's really bad. Yeah. It's to the point now where the court just, I think it was last week, called an emergency meeting of stakeholders to try to figure out what to do about the volumes, because it's just not sustainable. They're seeking input from the bar to understand.
I was at that. There was the stat that really took my attention. So it's 50% almost increase over last year, which was a 50% increase over the year before. And 25% of JRs are dismissed due to lack of applicant record. So.
But I think that, like, the epic state of crisis, it's very hard to communicate. Like, I do sometimes feel like I am, and I don't want to sound hyperbolic, but it does feel sometimes like I'm working at a court in a developing country, because, like, trying to file things, trying to figure out whether your record is being accepted, not being able to file the next stage because the previous stage hasn't been registered. Again, not at all blaming the court, but the influx of litigation is just so gigantic.
Yeah.
But there's a lack of funding. Like, again, I think that faster processing has led to a complete collapse of the system. And I think that, I just, red flags go up like crazy when I see this too.
Well, you might like this one more. Support legal aid for asylum seekers and refugees so that claimants receive timely advice.
It's hard to criticize that. I mean, study after study has proven that the whole system benefits when people are properly represented. That means that, like, the board itself, the adjudicators that decide these cases, it helps them a lot to do their job faster and more effectively when people are properly represented.
Yep. Do you have any
something-
hint at what this one will mean? Move forward with a credible and fair immigration system that removes failed claimants once due process has been accorded?
I mean, we already do that. I don't know what that means.
No. Strengthen the integrity of the border by increasing resources for security screenings, quickly identifying and removing inadmissible individuals, tightening visa requirements, enhancing enforcement against immigration fraud. I think a lot of this is already in place. Some of it was in response to Trump's fentanyl threat. They definitely need to do something about resources for security screenings.
Yeah. I do like that.
Yeah. No, honestly, this situation is just, it's unsustainable.
The French stuff, that immigration is a shared responsibility with the government of Quebec. The 12% target we already did. And strengthen federal, provincial, and territorial collaboration, which would be a change because the previous government, without any consultation, seemingly just cut the provincial nomination programs by 60%. And the BC government basically actually last week issued a press release stating that there'd been no consultation and that the cuts were so drastic that for non-healthcare related positions this year in BC, they were only going to do about 100 invites out of a pool of 10,000. So again, when we talk about luring the best and brightest Americans and other people around the world, that doesn't work with today's current landscape unless something changes.
Yeah.
Which kind of segues to the Conservatives, and I didn't want to move quite off the Liberals completely, but one of the Conservative platforms or Conservative pledges segues nicely from the Liberals. Reject the radical Liberal Century Initiative proposal to grow Toronto to a city of 33.5 million, Montreal to a city of 12.2 million, Vancouver to a city of 11.9 million, Calgary and Edmonton 15, Ottawa 4.8. What do you make of the Century Initiative stuff that's been thrown around?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but that is not a Liberal policy. I mean, it's been affiliated with the party, but I don't think
so
it's
actually
been a part. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's been affiliated. The allegation, the strongest link is that one of Mark Carney's senior advisors, Mark Wiseman, I think his name is the founder of the Century Initiative. Carney's spoken at the Century Initiative, which we talked about at a previous episode. And that's sort of what ties it there now.
I just think it's a little bit misleading to label it as a Liberal proposal. I mean, I agree with you, Stephen, that there are some sort of backroom connections there, but I don't think it's.
I don't know.
And is it more than just planning to have the capacity to support that kind of population growth, or is it actually about trying to build that population?
No, it's just planning everything to get to a target of 100 million Canadians by 2100, which actually, because of the growth in 2023, the previous federal government was actually exceeding these targets. I have no, I think I don't buy necessarily the Century Initiative connection. I do think that the Liberals are going to expand immigration beyond what's in the plan that they've set forth, as well as their campaign. I think it will be done to say that in order to stand up to Trump, Canada needs to be a bigger country. This is like, I have no evidence of this. It's just kind of part of the reason why I think it, like, there've just been hints that they were waiting until after the election, that they had grown the population. They then froze it and started implementing cuts due to politics, and they're falling in the polls. And even like Mark Miller said in that interview, like, we can't regularize status of people until after the election. So I don't know. I think and for the reasons that we discussed, like, I don't think the current numbers work.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't
Mhm.
know.
But I
What I
mean,
also
part
did
of the
was I
reason that
plugged
they don't
into
work, sorry.
I plugged into ChatGPT, taking the Harper growth figures, because there's another they've talked about elsewhere, like growing the population back to like the Harper levels. And if it had continued, yeah, we will restore. So let's just get into the concern. We will restore integrity of the system, crack down on fraud, reduce foreign workers, limit permanent immigration to a sustainable rate similar to levels under the Harper government. If you take the numbers under the Harper government, you still get to, like, by 2100, Vancouver is going to be a city of not 11.9 million as under wherever they got these numbers, but it's still going to be like 8.5 million just under the Harper numbers, assuming that it grows at the same trajectory. So I think I think a conversation actually about whether that is something desirable is worthwhile. But
I always worry when people talk in terms of absolute numbers, because I mean, let's just like forget everything for a second and say, okay, well, what's wrong with Toronto being a city of 33.5 million? If you had all the infrastructure,
Exactly.
and if there was no housing crisis, and if we had enough, there's nothing really black and white wrong with those numbers. It's just the connection between that and the infrastructure, I think, is the missing piece.
Exactly. If the TTC can actually match it, and there are places for people to live, and there's hospital beds, and people to service those hospitals, it's about the fact that you can't grow the population without having those other things worked out, which I think is what the Century Initiative is saying has been happening, that you grew the population without doing the other stuff. They're talking, again, as I understand it, which is very superficial, that it was like not smartly developed, but rather putting the cart before the horse, and that's what caused the disconnect.
It was reckless.
Yeah, reckless. Again, I think that this is like a bit of a simplification, and I don't know anything about whether or not you can call it the Liberal proposal or not. But
yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I would want to live in Vancouver if it was 8 million necessarily. I probably would want to move to a smaller town.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's like, it's in any event. But I guess the point I'm raising is neither the Conservative nor the Liberal platforms like call for that different a scenario where Vancouver is more than triple what it is now or double by 2100. The other things that they pledge, so keep the rate of population growth below the rate of housing growth, job growth, and healthcare accessibility to ensure sustainable immigration levels that are fair for Canadians. I have no idea how they do that.
Yeah, I feel like that about a lot of these.
The people come. That's actually, if you build it, they will come. But the Carney initiative of the Century stuff we already talked about. Require union LMIA pre-checks, ensuring unions get consulted before employers hire foreign workers.
Doesn't that happen? Like
only
if it's a unionized workplace.
Yeah.
So in this scenario, if a company wants an LMIA to get a software developer, they're going to go to the Teamsters. I don't know. I don't like. There's got to be like some sort of nuance.
Like it's very. I'm confused. Yeah.
Yeah. Require criminal background checks for individuals entering Canada on a study permit.
I don't have strong feelings about this. I do think that it adds another layer of bureaucracy, which, I don't know what problem they're trying to solve. Like,
Yeah.
is this a thing where a lot of international students have criminal records? I haven't seen that. Have you seen
And they
that?
do request
No.
these in a lot of applications from a lot of
Sure.
specific visa offices already. So it's not applied uniformly.
Mm-hmm.
So sure,
I wasn't aware that was a big problem.
me neither.
That sounds good. So process refugee claims faster on a last in, first out basis and implement departure tracking so we have a clear idea of how many people are overstaying their visa. I've heard rumors that they are going to do last in, first out for refugee claims, like the current government.
Yeah, that's so problematic. I mean, you remember the days when we had all of those backlogs, and people who made their claim earlier are waiting longer to have their claim adjudicated, right? Which is fine if you're like a single person, but if if your spouse and kids are stuck back in the home country waiting for your case to go through, and you're waiting 3 years to have a hearing, that's I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, there's also the weird thing that people right now being triaged for screening based on the fact that they might not need a hearing. Those are going slower than the ones that require a hearing. So there's definitely triaging needs to be streamlined, but
and I understand what they're getting at, right? Like it's almost like, okay, like we're giving up on that first batch of people. Like that's going to take forever. We get it, but we're going to realize gains on the back end where people are going to fire through the system faster. And if they're rejected, we can get them out of the country before they start to establish themselves and file all kinds of other cases like humanitarian applications and whatever else they might choose to do. Like it does have a certain kind of logic. I'm just
does it? Yeah. Okay. I get it. I get what you're saying. Yeah.
My heart breaks for the first batch though.
For sure. I think it's more just like, and this is something we talked about with respect to the Liberal platform, is whether or not there's a fair but better way of actually looking for and filtering out truly non-genuine claims at an earlier stage in the proceeding, one that doesn't like abandon procedural fairness, but at the same time is like, yeah, we're just not going to proceed.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Last one, expand and speed up removals for any criminal activity on a visitor permit. Anyone who is here on a visitor visa who breaks our laws will be removed from Canada.
They already are.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I can think of is if they're talking about not requiring a criminal conviction.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Or
that's the only way. I mean, it could, like, this is what I was talking about before with the gel amnesia effect, is you could read this and be like, what? We let people on visitor permits like commit
break
crimes,
our laws,
get arrested, go to jail, and then come out, do it again, revolving door. The hell
and
is
it's
this?
not just visitor visa, it's any temporary resident status. So like, again, I'm not really sure what that
So it's either a complete fluff promise that doesn't mean anything because it's already the case, or if we assume that there is some meaning, that it will target people who don't have convictions.
The other thing I wonder about is sometimes, like, if somebody is serving a sentence, they will, like, there's some ambiguity to me that's shifted over the years about whether or not they serve out their sentence and then are removed immediately upon release. And I've been finding that more CBSA has been kind of intervening and saying, hey, to the law enforcement, release them so that we can remove them. I feel like there's been more collaboration, and I think perhaps they are talking about formalizing that in a different way. But again, that's speculation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we have a comment from someone on YouTube who I think is what this is based on. And so her comment is, it's time to deport those who want to protest violently on Canadian streets for a different country. So I think that this is a subtle way of hinting that that's what they're going to be doing. But again, whether that's in there to just placate people who might not know that that's already the thing, or that they're going to do it without a conviction, is unclear.
But they do make reference, like even their own baseline is the person has to have broken a law, right? And presumably someone who breaks the law, like, you don't know that unless it's proven that they're convicted.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And one thing the Liberals are bringing in, from what I understand, that kind of addresses this protest thing is they're going to restrict where people can protest, so that you can't protest close to a place of worship or a school. Another one that I didn't check if the Liberals have, but I know that the Conservatives do, is to bring in mobility for Canada, UK, Australia, and New Zealand, the whole CANZUK thing, which I think will likely come. Another comment that we got, there's quite a few comments, although a few people are dominating the comments, is whether do you think the Conservatives will increase the citizenship residency period back to 5 years? I don't think it was ever 5 years. I think it was 4 out of 6.
Yeah.
Do you foresee that? It's not in any of the pledges.
Nobody's talking about that.
No one's raised it. I could see them doing it.
Keep in mind that when a lot of those citizenship reforms were made, like way back when, that like residency fraud and all of that was like at a fever pitch during those years, and that's no longer really the case. I mean, I think they really clamped down on that, and now people that are going through the citizenship system, there's a lot less fraud now than there was back then. So I think that was like at that time, there was a lot of impetus to reform citizenship. I don't know if that really exists now. Nobody's really talking about this as an issue.
No. And another question that we have is on the topic of removal of charges for those on visitor visa, which again is just how we're interpreting the proposal. It's not what Poilievre explicitly said, is whether you think that means that they're going to waive that automatic no pre-removal risk assessment.
Again, I think that's more complicated because that deals with international law and what the obligations are about charter reform. Exactly.
Yeah, you would breach the charter if you remove that without having a reasonable alternative.
To not send somebody back to a place where they could be subject to torture and cruel and unusual punishment, life, liberty, and security of the person, all that kind of stuff. So,
yeah.
So what's your overall sense? Mine is, unless they do blow numbers out of the water and backtrack once they have a majority, if they get a majority, it's going to be a pretty tough few years for immigrants, their representatives.
Yeah, although I think it will have the effect as well of separating the wheat from the chaff. I think a lot of practitioners who are out there just picking up the very easy, low-hanging fruit, I think a lot of that will dry up. But I think for practitioners who are very skilled and are good at problem solving and creative practitioners, I think there's still going to be a lot of room at the top.
Yeah, my other takeaway is that transparency is not going to be at the top of the agenda for anybody. And so I think that we're going to be seeing like the increased, or at least the same, but I probably would expect the increased use of kind of obfuscation tools so that there's a lot of automation, there's a lot of AI, and that we don't ever have a lot of visibility into how decision making is going to occur. I don't know. That's my vibe on all of this. And I understand these are campaign platforms, but that's just my takeaway.
Yeah, any final thoughts?
I just think that leading up to all of this, before Trump became involved, like immigration was such a hot button issue. Like everybody was talking about it. It looked like it was going to be a big ballot box issue, and because of tariffs, like all of the oxygen got sucked out of this very important debate, and nobody's really paying attention to it right now, which I think is a pity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because
The other one, the big thing coming up also is CUSMA is supposed to be renegotiated in 2026, which for those Americans who are trying to lure will be big.
The one final comment is that I think that the cat is out of the bag. I think public support for immigration is low. And I think that, you can see it even just tracking the comments we've had throughout today's
Don't
episode.
read the YouTube comments.
No, I know. That's what you keep telling me. So I think that is why the platforms are the way that they are. I don't think you have a huge groundswell of support for foreign workers. People are feeling the pinch right now. It is a difficult time.
Do you think, let's suppose that Carney gets a majority.
Yeah.
Do you think it matters what the public thinks, or will the takeaway for the Liberals be, we were 25 points back in the poll, all it took was a leadership change. We don't need to worry too much because we can always just change the leader again in the future?
Personally, I don't think democracy is at a super, super high point anywhere. I don't think it matters. They want to get elected. This is just my personal opinion. Obviously, I don't think it will matter.
Oh, no, I think that's what I mean. Like, look at all the cabinet ministers who came out once the carbon tax was repealed, being like, oh, we never liked it anyways. We were just staying that because we wanted power.
Exactly.
Like,
I mean, even the flip-flopping that's happened in the current administration, like, yes, we believe in all this. We believe in all this. We're going to do this for the students. Oh, goodbye, students. I think it's a hectic, helter-skelter kind of a time. And so I don't think that this is necessarily any real reflection of what's going to endure. But this is what they think is going to get them elected right now.
Well, and we've been in knee-jerk mode for such a long time. I hardly even remember a time when we weren't. It's like public wants this, woo, we're going this way. Public wants that, woo, we're going that way. And it's like just constant. It's like there doesn't seem to be any policy, serious policy thinking going on.
No, for sure. I totally agree with that. I think it's gonna keep jumping around based on who's lobbying for what is the need at the minute. Not a whole lot of concern about whether or not it's entirely fair, as long as it's fast and it responds to a specific issue in the moment. I think that's where we're at.
All right. On that happy note, happy election weekend. And
I'm gonna go cry
I don't know
now.
why it's on a Monday instead of a weekend, but
I think it's always on a Monday.
It is always on a Monday. Well, the BC elections, I think, are on weekends. I could be wrong about that. I feel like there was a recent election that was on a weekend. But I think the federal ones, for some reason, are on Mondays, and then they complain that not enough people vote. But that's a whole separate rant that I can get on.
Not having that problem this
They're like
time.
professional ranchers these days. Yeah.
Right. All right.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much
coming
for
on. It'll be
joining.
interesting to see what happens.
Yeah.
Great to talk to you guys.
Yeah, always. Take care.